Welcome to the Armenian News Network Groong Week in Review for September 22, 2024. Today we're talking with Arthur G Martirosyan. Welcome back, Arthur. Great to have you on the show.
Welcome, Arthur.
Welcome.
We are recording this on September 23rd, and last week was full of anniversaries, but the main one we want to talk about on this show was September 21st, Armenia's Independence Day. The country turned 33 years old. Before the 2020 war, and certainly before the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, it used to be a reminder of the resilience and the enduring spirit of the Armenian people who, throughout centuries of hardship, have preserved their culture, language, and identity. Therefore, independence is not just a day on the calendar, it is a foundation of our nationhood, I believe, and it gives us a chance to reflect on the past, celebrate our achievements, and strengthen our hope for the future. After 2020, and especially after the ethnic cleansing of Artsakh, we also must acknowledge the solemn reality that we are faced with today. And just 2 days before our Independence Day on September 21, on September 19, we marked the first anniversary of the tragic ethnic cleansing of Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh. In summary, last week was full of contradictory feelings for all of us, yours truly including. But Arthur, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the meaning of this date? Why is it important? Anything else you can add?
Well, it's obviously the foundation of the Third Republic, and when you look back at what was done on that day, 95%, I think the turnout was 96%. 96% of Armenian voters voted for independence. I think that was a remarkable celebration of true self-determination and democracy. And it saddens me that the powers that be in Armenia today are looking at that date as something that needs to be edited. They want to change the Declaration of Independence. They think that the Third Republic is over and they're starting the Fourth Republic. But what we have now is not a republic. And I think the Third Republic was a mixed bag too, because a real republic starts with the separation of powers. We never had a real true separation of powers, checks and balances in a real sense, and we don't have today. So I don't know what kind of Fourth Republic they are talking about, but it's certainly unlikely to get the start of the Third Republic. A consensus of 96%, a sufficient consensus of 96%, is something that you cannot easily replicate. And I don't think the powers that be, had they tried a new referendum, they're going to get the turnout or they're going to get the similar vote for any initiative that they may engage the nation in. So these are my thoughts about it. And I don't think there was anything, there were a couple of statements about the day, but it was not any major celebration. I was in Yarablu, and the parents of the bereaved soldiers were there. And they were there on purpose. They just were there trying to make sure that Pashinyan doesn't go there on that day. And that says a lot about where we are as a nation today. And he didn't go. As far as I know, he didn't even try going to Yarablu on 21st.
That's right. He did not go.
Yeah, as opposed to 2 years ago when they essentially brutally cleared the area of any resistors so that Pashinyan could visit. This time they deliberately did not even worry about that and didn't attend. So the other things that happened last week, Pashinyan was at the so-called Global Armenian Summit, featuring hand-picked participants from various diaspora communities who would accept an invitation to participate in the first place. And during his speech, he underscored that Armenia's national patriotism has destructive aspects in it. He further blamed external empires for instituting this destructive patriotism. Meanwhile, on the anniversary of Artsakh's ethnic cleansing, Ilham Aliyev was in Stepanakert, where he toured the depopulated town, opened the university there, that he essentially imported students to attend at that university, and also essentially called Armenians settlers, nomads, and visitors in the ancient land that they've lived in for millennia. So, I don't want to be too emotional, but what can you tell about the differences in the messaging that Pashinyan and Aliyev are giving to their respective people?
If that's a question to me, I think Aliyev is obvious. He thinks that the page is turned, it's over. There is no Artsakh, and this is the time to reaffirm their revisionist history, which they began in late 80s, 1980s, with Bunyatov and other revisionists, which was to say that Armenians never were a part of that, and they were brought in by Russians after the Russian-Persian War in 1828. And before that, they were never even part of that. There were all artifacts and historical monuments of Albanian, Caucasian Albanian nature. So he's going to continue with that. We should have no doubts about their intentions. This is not going to be any different from what we saw in Nakhchivan, where they've obliterated any Armenian historical presence, any evidence of Armenian historical presence. They're going to try and do the same there. And with that, for them, it's a new beginning of what he calls Western Azerbaijan, which is a claim on Armenian proper territory. I mean, I'm saying proper. For me, Artsakh too was Armenian proper, but meaning from what Pashinyan calls the Alma-Ata Declaration, Armenia. So that's Aliyev. As to Pashinyan, I think he would want to change the constitution. He would want to obliterate the declaration and say that it was all wrong, that we had this, what he was calling, and even confessing that he sinned in being a proponent of that forepost, by the way, a word used by the Azeri propaganda, forepost of front base of the Russian Empire. He was not saying the Russian Empire, but it's obvious which one. So no more. Are we done with that? Are we trying to break away from that? And the new Armenia that he's talking about, as opposed to historical Armenia, which is a dangerous concept, the new Armenia is going to be confined to the territory of 28,743 square kilometers. I think he makes now clear in that. And that should be very problematic because as he was talking to the delegates of the summit, well, it was called Summit of Diaspora, these participants should have understood the implications of what he was saying. The implications are that only those who live on the territory of the Armenian Republic, only those who are the citizens of the Armenian Republic, are the ones who he cares about. The rest are just, okay, you are ethnic Armenian, it's your identity issue, you can stay Armenian, you may change your identity, it doesn't really matter. Although the official message may be different, that they care about diaspora and whatnot, but the implication is different. The implication is that only the ones confined to the territory, the new Armenia, are the Armenians, Armenian citizens. That is the Armenian nation, as he understands it. Political nation is confined to that territory.
Arthur, what is the need for him to collect a diaspora summit then?
Well, there are still some, conceptually, they would love to still have some players in diaspora because they don't want to have the diasporans at a total war with the Republic of Armenia, right? And I can understand these diasporans. I can understand, but I will never accept what they're doing. Because what they're doing is akin to kind of the French collaborationism with the Vichy government during World War II. So they, in some ways, they are legitimizing him. But why he needs those diasporans? To show that it's all normal. Okay, you can go there, but we decide here. You diasporans do not decide anything about Armenia, about even Armenian history. I'm going to be the one writing that history in the new textbooks. Are you going to have a different textbook in Armenia about Armenian history? That's fine. We'll do whatever you're doing, but this is the Armenian history. This is Armenian Republic, and therefore this is the political nation. And you are just ethnic Armenians who happen to live in different parts of the world. You have the intention or willingness to serve the Armenian nation, fine. You don't, we don't care about that. So he collects only those who are loyal to him in some ways. Why they are loyal, why I say I understand them. I had the opportunity to talk to one of them, the guy from Romania, a writer and a member of the long-time member of the parliament of Romania. And I understand why he came, because they want to somehow to be dealing with the state of Armenia. And right now, that's the government. In some ways, it reminded me the problem of 1920s, 1930s, when diaspora also was divided, split. Do you recognize Soviet Armenia? Do you cooperate with Soviet Armenia?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm saying I understand, especially the ones who are maybe unofficial or de facto leaders of the communities. But there are also the ones who, I don't know all of the people who came, but I'm sure that there are ones who would go anyway. It doesn't matter for them. They just want to, it's an massaging egos, or I don't know what motivates people when they go and attend such things. But the real message of that event should not have escaped them, right? When he shows them the map and he says, this is New Armenia, he says that this is the political nation. For me, the political nation is broader. We do not, because of our history and how it evolved, we do not necessarily fall in the pattern of territorial definition of the nation. But he emphasizes the territoriality of that. Of course, he has this commissar on whatever his official title on relations with diaspora. Of course, they need to show that things are moving normal, and diasporans recognize me as a leader who is not, by the way, limited to the terms of democratic elections. And this is also important because he has not come with the mandate. He hasn't been elected by 26% of voters to do what he now is telling the nation is going to do. Because what he is going to do is paradigmatic change, identity change, which he intends to do, and to stay in power long enough to make sure that it happens. That New Armenia and New Armenians, the political nation, again, are going to have a new father figure, and that's him, Pashinyan.
Well, the only thing I could add to that is that it seems that Pashinyan's concept of territory seems to be compliant with whatever happens on the ground. So if Aliyev makes further military progress against Armenia, how is he going to edit Armenian identity to comply with that? That's what my question would be. Yeah, it is what it is, and I think this is why we're doing the show, and to bring the countering viewpoints to what is happening in Armenia.
Arthur, over the course of 2024, the term strategic partnership has been perhaps a little overused. Armenia has a strategic partnership with Georgia, which nobody really has any idea of what it means. And 2 days ago, Biden's congratulatory letter on the Independence Day of the Third Republic also alluded to a strategic partnership between the US and Armenia. What kind of strategic partnership can the US and Armenia have? What is the vision here?
Well, they talk about strategic partnership, and you're right that there is an inflation of meanings. The people have been using terms without necessarily thinking what the implications are. Is Israel a strategic partner of the United States?
Yeah.
I'd say yes. Is Armenia going to have the same status as Israel in that strategic partnership? I'd say no. And if it's a no, then the question is, why are you using the same words to describe your relationship with Israel with somebody whose relationship is not going to be the same? It's just words. I don't know who even wrote for Biden the text. I don't even know if Biden is writing his own text anymore. And I don't even know if we should pay that much attention what he has to say. Unfortunately, we will have to wait and see what happens in the United States in November, who comes in and what happens. Nancy Pelosi, when she was with the group of American congressmen in Yerevan, there was such a buzz in the city, created by KP, the Pashinyan's party, that this is it. We have a strategic partner. That strategic partner didn't even use the words ethnic cleansing.
Yeah.
Right? That strategic partner didn't even use sanctions about the gross violator of human rights. But they used sanctions when an attorney, unfortunately, died in jail, in Russian jail, Magnitsky, right? He died. That's a sad fact. I don't know. I haven't seen investigations. Was it really his health issues? Was he killed in prison? Anything is possible.
But they have legislation called the Magnitsky
But
Act.
they have sanctions, immediately initiated sanctions. I mean, are we a strategic partner and we do not deserve even that kind of attention against someone who's been violating the decisions of the international court? The United States cannot enact sanctions. Maybe their strategic partner is Azerbaijan. I mean, I have no idea. Because I can say that Turkey is definitely a strategic partner of the United States. But Armenia, I don't know. They will have to spell out for me what are the modalities of that partnership.
Yeah, there's definitely a lack of definition going on. How will this vision or partnership affect Armenia's membership in the CSTO? Also, at this point, how will it also affect the Eurasian Economic Union? Because Putin has essentially said that the two organizations are tied at the hip. You pretty much can't be in one and not be in the other. And Armenia's economy is heavily dependent on not just Russia, but the Eurasian Economic Union.
Well, this is the huge dilemma that Pashinyan has. From one hand side, there are all sorts of advisors, including former diplomats. I don't know if he's still involved, the American, who say, okay, it's going to be painful, 3 years without electricity, maybe, but then you will break away from all dependence on Russia. Okay, so they're getting that message, right? You can hear it. But those who have a real understanding of economic dependencies and sensitivities and vulnerabilities of Armenia obviously would never advise Pashinyan to go that far. I mean, Georgia never went that far. Georgia has still going economic relations with with Russia. So now let's leave Georgia for a second. Let's talk about Armenia. The CSTO. Effectively, we are no longer part of CSTO because the only reason we were part of CSTO was not because Kyrgyz and Kazakhs were going to fight for Armenia or Armenian interests. We were there because that allowed us to be in partnership with Russia and to get weapons at below than market prices. Russia doesn't have spare weapons to give us, to sell us, whatever. What's the point of being in CSTO? And in that very meeting with diasporans, and I'm sure that most of them wanted to hear something like that, something that would be essentially saying that he's breaking away with Russia. Okay, that's the kind of diasporans he probably had there. I don't know, and I don't want to exaggerate this, but I think that's very probable. So he's telling them that CSTO, we are getting very close to the point of no return, and for whatever reason uses a Russian term, point of no return. We are there. We ask them many questions. If they don't answer our questions, every minute we're getting to a point where we're gonna leave CSTO. Okay, and he says that CSTO now poses a threat to the Armenian independence, to the Armenian security, which logically is a nonsense, right? If I'm telling you that this thing here in my hands is a threat to you, or is a threat to me, and I am in power to remove it or leave it or whatever, and I'm not doing it, it means logically that I'm part of that threat right now. I am that threat because I'm recognizing it as a threat, and I'm saying, yes, fine. We still haven't reached the point of no return. Why he hasn't reached the point of no return? Exactly because what you mentioned now. If previously Russia was making this distinction, okay, CSTO, military cooperation and political cooperation is one, economic cooperation is decoupled and fine. They are saying no more. It's not going to be happening. You know, 2 days before that statement from Pashinyan, a Russian media, unusual development, for Russian state media, television in particular, they all were giving news from Armenia. What was the news? Russians went and helped recover after that terrible flood that destroyed even the railroad, critical railroad. Why it's critical? Why did they work day and night to restore that railroad? Because Armenia gets its supplies from Russia. And for instance, I'm just telling you what that news was saying. And for instance, Armenia is getting its grain supplies, and the grain supplies very low on grain. So that's why it was critical. They worked day and night and restored it. Okay. In Armenia, it was little covered, by the way.
Barely.
Why Russians were doing that? Because they wanted to send a message, right? Here, we, Russia, were still there to help you when you are in dire straits. And hint that you still depend on our grain and stuff. So 2 days later, Pashinyan makes a decision to send his Secretary of National Security Council to a meeting, international meeting about food security of Ukraine. Okay.
It was right after the Ukraine victory formula, like a conference where Zelensky presented Ukraine's victory plan.
Right. The message that Russians are getting is we still are going to go and do what we want to do. And Zakharova, for the first time, the spokeswoman for Foreign Affairs Ministry, for the first time, openly threatens Armenia. She reminds Armenians that 90% of all grain supplies are coming from Russia. And she says, you better think about your own food security and have a conference with Russia on that, then go and schmooze with our enemies. So they're making it very clear. You want to benefit from economic cooperation with us, you cannot have it two ways. You cannot go on, politically be with the West, our enemies right now, and they're not using even the word adversaries, enemies. They're at war, and they're saying they're at war with the West. 50 countries, the coalition around Ukraine is their enemies. You can be with them, your choice, but then you will face a different music. And that music is not just economic. Pashinyan's vision of that crossroads that he's talking about, who are the members of that crossroad? On the ground. I'm not talking about Finland. They send that, I don't know, probably well-written, I haven't even seen it, well-written with buzzwords text to all sorts of capitals. Armenian diplomats are taking it everywhere. But who are the principal players on the ground who are going to be participants of that?
It's the 3+3.
And essentially, you don't have relations with the two. You hope that you will improve your relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey, but you still don't have that because they have a different agenda for you. And that agenda is Western Azerbaijan, or as some Turkish functionaries are saying now, connecting two states, one nation, right? Connecting. So for them, it's not just a corridor.
Right.
So their agenda is very different. You, Armenia, we are there as a kind of a nuisance, an obstacle to making their plans materialize. So Pashinyan's choice is very dire. I sometimes even think that to a level, he had coordinated with Moscow, that he can, in rhetoric, be very anti-Moscow. He can even take some steps that will be seen as anti-Russian. But in fact, he's not going to cross some important red lines. Why? Because that way I can be more useful to you, Russia. No sanctions against me, excellent relations with Western countries. What can I bring you from New York, Mr. Putin? What can I bring you from Paris or wherever? So that way I can be more useful for you. But then there are some lines that he has started to cross that make Moscow very angry, openly angry. Although Peskov was trying to say, we will patiently continue to explain to our valid partner and valid partner that CSTO is not a threat to Armenia. In fact, it's protecting Armenia, blah, blah, blah. Yes, but that patience also has limits. And Zakharova's message was about that limit. Did he get the message? I have no idea. I mean, in a sense, he does, because it also is going to affect his entourage, all sorts of businesses. And when the American diplomat, a former, I think, OSCE ambassador to the OSCE,
Dan Baer,
says that, okay, 3 years, Armenia, just have patience, 3 years of hardships, 3 years without electricity and all that, and then it will be all great. Okay, first of all, I don't know what he means by it will be great. Second, we already have been once in that situation, and that's in the 90s. And how did that end? That ended by Levon Petrosyan signing with Yeltsin the strategic partnership agreement between the two countries. I'm not saying, I mean, they even making all sorts of gestures around the nuclear power station. At some point, it's like a deja vu, because Levon Petrosyan also wanted to have the nuclear power station shut down, right?
Yeah.
My question is, how it's going to impact the population of Armenia, 3 years of that kind of hardships? Who's going to stay in Armenia in that way? What's going to happen? And when they are promising us the paradise, what does that paradise look like? Is it going to be with the at peace with Turkey and Azerbaijan on their terms? And their terms include connecting the two countries, through our territory.
Yeah.
It's not just a communications corridor for economic gains and whatnot. No, they're talking about physically connecting the two countries.
I'm not sure why Dan Bears didn't give that advice to all of Europe at the start of the war and say, basically, live without Russian gas for a few years, a few cold winters, and you'll just be fine. You'll be fine.
No, I mean, it's a different story, obviously, on Ukraine, but essentially, we can see what's happening in Ukraine. I mean, it doesn't matter how it ends right now for me. I mean, who's going to claim victory? Is it Russians or the West, or as Zelensky is saying now in DC, he has a plan of victory, whatever it is. Nuke Russia, is that how you're going to beat Russians? So whatever his plan is, or whoever wins, Ukraine has already lost, because no one is going to bring back tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of those who died for this. Is that all that they are talking about worth it? What is Zelensky even talking about? They died to protect Europe and to make Europe more secure. Is it really true? Did they die because of that?
Yeah. Speaking of the testimony in front of the US Helsinki Commission, and you mentioned Dan Baer a few times, I feel obliged to also mention that in that same speech, he said that, we cannot do anything about Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is really important, and we have to sit on the table with it because of this exact situation we have with Ukraine, in that Azerbaijan has the important function of rebranding Russian gas as Azerbaijani gas so that Ukrainians can buy it or pretend to buy it.
Europe can buy it, yes.
Yeah.
It's not only gas.
But what's interesting to me...
No, it's not just about gas, no.
Yeah, so in the context of strategic partnerships, though, what does strategic partnership mean when the enemy of your strategic partner, Azerbaijan, has more importance to you in terms of its strategic relationship in all aspects than you do? And, what I can't process that. And recently, I had the opportunity to read that infamous 2019 Rand Corporation report titled Extending Russia, which talked about actually using their words, exploiting tensions in the South Caucasus. And in that paper even, it said that, if we exploit tensions and if Armenia goes to the West, then Azerbaijan will go to Moscow and vice versa. But it seems like even that is not happening. It's like, they exploited the tensions, and both sides, in one way or another, are serving an important purpose for the West against Russia, at least to the extent possible. But what are your thoughts about US's relationship with Azerbaijan in terms of strategic partnership?
Well, I mean, gas, oil, that's obvious. Everybody talks about it. But I don't think it's just limited to that. There are more important issues. One is Iran, right? And it's too important for Israel for the US to neglect that interest. And for the US, it's also important. We can talk more about it if you're interested, but it's obvious, like what interests Israel and the US may have vis-a-vis Iran. Number two is more long-term strategic. It's getting NATO access to the Caspian Sea and beyond to Central Asia, almost getting to the wall of China. And the importance, geopolitical importance of that project is not very different from the original pan-Turkism, which, as we know, the Hungarian Wambari, who was a British Empire spy, put together. That's the big game, right? We're talking about the end of the 19th century, but the plan is no different. I mean, except that it's now the strategic targets have changed. Russia remains as one, but there is also China. So for them, it's going to be important as long as their vision of the world of the threats and analysis of threats is not going to change. So Azerbaijan, therefore, is important. And that's why Aliyev has much more space to maneuver. He can have Putin on a state visit talking about furthering strategic partnership. And on the next day, he can talk about how he's going to negotiate with Ukraine, EU on how to, and Russia, how to renew the gas transportation contract that Ukraine had, and talk about Azerbaijan's importance for the West. So for him, it's obvious. I mean, he can play with both. Unfortunately, Armenia cannot, not because we could not potentially, but because we have a very uncouth and incompetent government. If Azerbaijan had oil and geopolitical positioning, we had a more important asset, more important resources, which we never got to use to its full extent, which is the human capital, which is the diaspora. Instead, these guys came and they further split the diaspora. The diaspora is as much split now as was Artsakh and Armenia, and now in Armenia, the cleavage, the splits continue, right? So the nation is split in so many different ways. So instead of mobilizing, instead of creating one that can operate in different capitals and advance Armenian interests, we have a very weak state and divided diaspora that is not capable of doing anything essentially without the state. So that's where we are, and that's why we are so weakened. We are not important for the West, no matter how much they talk about strategic partnership. We are only important as a vehicle, as a means to drive Russians out of the region. That's the only purpose. That's the only thing that we are used for. We are not losing. We are getting in adversarial relationship with Russia, and it's a dream come true for Azerbaijan. They could not even dream of a better situation to squeeze us out.
Yeah. Arthur, a little while ago, you mentioned Georgia. A week ago, Pashinyan was in Tbilisi discussing the strategic partnership that the two countries signed earlier this year. Back then, the agreement explicitly excluded defense partnership, but Defense Minister Babigyan and his staff have been in Georgia since then. I'm not sure exactly what has been worked out. Very little is known actually about this agreement. What kind of strategic partnership is desired? And can you tell us why defense was explicitly excluded?
Because Georgia has other obligations already with Azerbaijan and Turkey. And without their consent, it would be totally unacceptable if they got something going with Armenia without an explicit consent from Turkey and Azerbaijan. The influence of Turkey and Azerbaijan in Georgia cannot be over-exaggerated at this point. So Pashinyan is using the word strategic constantly. Everything is strategic, but I think he doesn't understand the meaning of the word strategy and strategic. So can we have strategic relationship with Georgia? Georgia that has also strategic relations with Azerbaijan and Turkey? Not at this point. Maybe he is dreaming about the time when he's going to do what his Western mentors have been telling him to do, to get away from Russia, to get rid of Russians. You need to do two things. And one he has done already. That's solve the problem of Artsakh, Karabakh. That's no longer an issue. And then solve the problems with Turkey. And he's working very hard to make sure that everything that Turks want, he gives them. And they are about our identity, essentially. So he maybe thinks that if he does all of that, then the doors will be open for a strategic partnership with Georgia too. But right now, at this point, he doesn't have that. So we cannot really talk about strategic partnership in the full sense of that word right now.
So if there was any kind of a real strategic partnership, who would be the main beneficiary of such an agreement?
With Georgia and Armenia?
Yeah, between Georgia and Armenia.
I have not seen the agreement. Nobody even knows what they're talking about. I mean, this is one of the problems. You're asking me to comment on something that I haven't seen. I mean, maybe it was published. I haven't seen it, but I don't think
much was published. So I've taken it as an intention of goodwill between the two
right.
countries.
I mean, democratic Armenia, they have this concept, from Jean-Jacques Rousseau, the contract, right? They have a contract with us. They are the managers who've been hired to do the good things for the nation, and they came with a promise that everything is going to be transparent and clear. And we've gotten to a point where he negotiates. Do we know what he's negotiating with Azerbaijan in closed channel negotiation? No, we don't. We don't. And similarly, I don't know what's there in Georgia with Georgians. What kind of an agreement they have?
Okay.
Is this going to be a non-aggression pact with Georgians? Georgians going to come and fight with Armenians if Armenia gets attacked. We're going to go fight with Georgians if Georgians get attacked.
Exactly. All these are great questions, and there are absolutely no answers for what is meant by
because there is no transparency. There is no transparency. I mean, and it allows a lot of manipulation, but it also allows a lot of negative stuff for them too. Yeah. Because if you remember, there was a point when Belarusian President Lukashenko, who was present in that meeting between Aliyev and Sarkisyan, kind of spilled the beans. He said Aliyev was offering $5 billion US for territories around Karabakh at the time. And Serge Sarkisyan said no to that proposal. And Lukashenko was indignant. Why did he say no? It was a great proposal, $5 billion US. So now, if what we know about Aliyev, he's paying European, officials of all kinds, from government to parliament and whatnot. And if he had money on the table in those negotiations, can we exclude that they're talking about some economic benefits for certain companies in Armenia, gas, natural oil, and other stuff as part of the deal that he's getting with Aliyev right now? Can we rule that out? Of course not. I'm not asserting that it's happening, but I'm saying I cannot rule that out. That at least the Azeri side, hypothetically, can have that on the table. And this is the problem. We don't know what he negotiates with Georgians. I don't know what they're trying to get even. Did we have strategic partnership with Georgia in 2008 when during the 5-day war, Serge Sarkisyan said no to Russians who wanted to use the base in Armenia for
against Georgia,
the military aircraft against Georgia, and he said no to that. Did we have strategic partnership with them? No, but it was an act of strategic partnership, right, whether we had agreement or not. Understanding that they're our neighbors, we're going to be dependent on them, and they're never going to forgive us if we do something like that. Or they may forgive Russians for the war, but they will never forgive us. And I think it was a smart move. Long-term thinking move.
Definitely.
What are they talking about with Georgians? I even don't know. I don't even know what's going to happen with the Georgian political landscape right now.
So I want to talk about that, Arthur, because they have elections coming up next month, and the West has painted it in very dire terms. They say that a vote for the ruling party, Georgian Dream, is a pivot towards Russia, and they want to see the opposition unity alliance, which is an umbrella that includes Saakashvili's UNM, United National Movement, to win the elections. What's at stake?
Talking about influencing elections, right?
Absolutely. They want free and fair democratic elections as long as the outcome is approved by them. What's at stake in these elections for Georgia? Is it really a pivot to the east or the west, or how do you view this?
Well, I think Ivanishvili is not stupid. He may be not well educated, a billionaire, made billions, but he's definitely not stupid. In this current configuration of the world order, which is more like disorder than order, he figured that all these promises from the West that they are going to end up members of European Union, maybe one day NATO, is not going to solve the biggest problems that the country has. And that is Abkhazia and South Ossetia. One. Number two, he also understands that economically, Georgia is much better off dealing with Russia. Yes, they have all sorts of preferential agreements with European Union. The United States has done a lot to make Georgian wines easily enter the US market, and they promise Armenians the same thing. But they are not selling as well in the United States as they're selling in Russia. So tourism and all sorts of other things where he can see clearly he is benefiting more from that. Yes, they have a lot of animosity with the Russians, but he also understands that what Russians want and what he can give them and get in exchange is more realistic in terms of their national interest than this pie in the sky with Europeans. Moreover, what he is going to get with European Union, is in some ways toxic when it comes to the Georgian values, and in particular, the Georgian Orthodox Church. Why? Because the values clash with West, with Europeans. They clash only, and not only in what the Georgian Orthodox Church perceives as perversity and whatnot, but because they're gonna threaten the country demographically. They understand that if they start making moves in that direction, kind of legalize the sexual minorities and give them the rights and whatnot, the country already is on a declining curve when it comes to its demography. Now, if you think about all of that, wouldn't it make sense to continue to work with Russians, not to unnecessarily make it even worse than it already is in terms of political and perception of the population of Russia, hoping that, yes, one day Russians may, and they've been signaling it. I mean, I've been hearing these signals for a while from Russians, openly signaling. If you Georgians stay out of animosity with Russia, if you stay we're not saying loyal to Russia, but at least not adversarial to Russia.
Basically, remain neutral.
Yes, kind of the belt around Russia, the periphery, is not. It's counter to what the RAND was proposing in that report that you were talking about, Hovik. If you do that, then we may consider talking to our Abkhaz and Ossetian friends about forming a confederation. So you, Georgia, Abkhazia, and Ossetia can form a confederation. Is it a better outcome for Georgia than continuing on the track of getting more adversarial with Russia, especially in a time of uncertainty when they don't know, and we don't know either, by the way, we don't know how this whole thing is going to end with Russia and West. Did you hear Macron talk yesterday? Macron yesterday, I mean, he kind of surprised everybody. He's now talking about how Europe needs new architecture of security and how they need to forge new relationship with Russia so that Europe can be more secure in the decades to come.
I mean, just months ago, he was talking about sending troops to Russia.
Right, less than a month ago, yes. Yeah, that's why I'm saying, I mean, we live in time of uncertainty, right? So when this fog of war, when this uncertainty is, what if, I mean, I'm saying what Ivanishvili may be thinking. I'm not saying I can clearly think for Ivanishvili, but I've known people around him and I can say how he's thinking. Thinking, what if that scenario where Russia really gets what it wants from the West? We then are screwed if we take an anti-Russian position right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if that's part of the, I mean, maybe Pashinyan is not scared of that, or maybe, as I was alluding previously, he has some kind of an agreement with Moscow on how much anti-Russianism he can allow to make things happen with the West, where Russia is also a beneficiary from that relationship right now.
What do you think are the major impediments to a rapprochement around Abkhazia and South Ossetia? For instance, we know that the UNM group, they basically they take this as a civilizational approach. We're going to join Europe no matter what. Abkhazia and South Ossetia, be damned. But even ordinary
Who is
Georgians,
saying that? Who is saying that?
well, that was, I'm not quoting directly, but we had a former UNM member on our podcast, and and we were asking the question about Russia versus the West, and they're saying that even if, for instance, even if Russia acceded that South Ossetia and Abkhazia may join Georgia, or Georgia may somehow get it back into a single state, they expressed the opinion that that's not important for them. For them, like it's they use the word civilizational choice to be with Europe.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not important for me. The what's concerning to me is ordinary Georgians, and maybe even ordinary South Ossetians and Abkhazians, because would they be willing? I mean, does Russia have enough leverage on them to persuade them to make moves towards a confederation with Georgia? Because they have seen what can happen. So
I
that's
think
what.
that goes without saying when it comes to Ossetians, because apart from South Ossetia, there is North Ossetia. If North Ossetians and Moscow say, yes, it's a good idea, form that confederation, I don't think you'll find too many people in Skin Valley who will be saying, no, we're not doing that. Abkhazia is more complex that way. But still, I think the Russian influence is such that they may deliver that if they wanted to. When it comes to Georgia, I don't know who you were talking to, but clearly the people who are talking about civilizational choice, they're the ones who are in opposition to Ivanishvili they have a different opinion.
Yeah, so
right?
this is definitely a member of the opposition, but
Right. So they may be saying that. How well does it go with the Georgian populace in general? Did they get what they wanted? In part, yes. They have no visa to Europe. They can travel, and they can see that. And some who travel go and see, and some even go not on tourists. They go and stay and they work. They stay there. Doesn't matter, as nannies or whatever, the babysitters, whatever the work they do in Europe illegally, right? Because the bill doesn't. I don't think Georgians really now are happy about what they see, or they would want Georgia to be part of that kind of Europe. Because as Armenians, they have this idealized view of Europe. In that ideal, Christianity and Christian values are not the last element, right, in their vision of Europe. And that's where they clash, these values. They can see that some of these liberal values that are being imposed on them go against their, again, Georgian Orthodox Church. Now, do you think Ivanishvili would go as far as adopt the law that everybody was against without having a green light from the Georgian Orthodox Church? Of course not. And he knows that who are the ones who are opposed? The opposition, the ones who've been spoon-fed for 30 years with grants, and of course they see their future as part of that, versus the majority of the population that still remains obedient, much more obedient to what the church will tell them. And if the church says they're a better future the dream is a better future for Georgia than these guys, I have no doubt that they're going to go and vote for them. So this is one of the challenges, because I don't think Europeans are very happy with, not so only Hungary, yes, Orban is an oddball, but Poland. Poland often is taking a stance against things that for many Europeans are now, old Europe, are sacred values. So Catholic on the issue of abortions, on the issue of LGBTQ or whatever laws they want to impose on them, it's going to be a no. It's going to be a no from the majority. Now, will the West accept that kind of democracy where the majority says no to the values that they think are important for them? I don't think so.
Okay. So Arthur, when it comes to this recent talk about strategic partnership between the US and Armenia, do you think that this is an effort by the US to strengthen its positions in Armenia as a reaction to the difficulties that the West is having with Georgia?
In some ways, maybe, but I don't think they have given up on Georgia to begin with. They think that They still have, the game is in progress. It's not over yet in Georgia. But the strategy in Armenia hasn't changed. The strategy has been the same for many years now. And what Pashinyan is saying now is exactly what some US and Western diplomats were saying in private conversations in 90s. Make a deal on Karabakh with Azerbaijan, close the past page with Turkey, and it will be easier for you to get rid of the Russian influence, and you will be a happy member of the Euro-Atlantic community. And that's exactly what he seems to be doing, right? He's doing that. He's saying that he's doing that. And therefore, he's welcome. Therefore, he's a Democrat for them.
Mm.
There's no democracy in Armenia. I haven't seen one-party rule without checks and balances and separation of powers, not even a republic. And they call that a democracy? Are you kidding me? They don't see what's happening in Armenia? Of course they do.
In some assessments, it's even worse today than during the 30 years that they were talking about it. But I want to move us to our next and final topic, which is the ongoing Armenian-Azerbaijani talks, if you can use that term. In the past week, two senior State Department officials, Joshua Huck and Louis Bono, visited Yerevan and Baku with the aim of getting closer to signing an agreement. Azerbaijan reiterated, though, that Armenia's constitution must be changed, while Armenia repeated its proposal to sign a partial agreement on whatever terms they agree upon. There's talk of the two foreign ministers continuing work in the US this coming week during the UN General Assembly meeting in New York. In fact, this is Monday, and Pashinyan just spoke there. So what is the urgency on the part of US to get this agreement signed, and what are the major impediments, in your opinion?
Well, I think the administration would love to have something before elections, if they can. If not, that agreement, if it's going to be done through their mediation, is going to continue to work on, again, squeezing Russians out. You are not necessary here. The sides can agree even in bilateral format without you. They don't need you. So, but for Azerbaijan, I think, are they asking for the moon when they say change your constitution? Do they understand what they're asking? That it's very difficult, even if Pashinyan wanted to do, it's almost a mission impossible. They do, but they continue to persist on that. I'm a negotiator, and if I can see that one side is using what we call red herring as an issue, right? So, okay, change your constitution. We can't do that. Well, we can't do that once we get reelected. But we may not get reelected if we don't get the peace agreement, because without that peace agreement, I won't be reelected in 26. So let's postpone that one. I'm not saying that's what they're talking about, by the way. This is me, negotiator, telling you how it may be. And I'm saying that it's highly probable that that's how they talk about it. And so they want Americans also to explain to them, no, he's your partner. You are not going to get a better leader in Armenia. He'll do it when he is reelected. He cannot do it right now. So let's decouple. Let's sign what there is. Let's leave that issue for later. One, but that's not the only issue. That's not the, I think there are other stumbling blocks here. And one major stumbling block is the population. To deflect or to dodge pressure, Aliyev came up with this concept of the conditions, conceptual conditions when and how Armenians can return to Artsakh. I guarantee their security. That comes from someone who cannot be trusted by a single Armenian, I think, except Pashinyan, maybe. If they take the Azerbaijani citizenship, they need to learn the state language. They need to have their children go and serve in the Azeri army. And what else citizens do? Or if they do all the stuff that other citizens do, they will be one of the minorities in my country. And see how happily Lezgis and Kalish live in my country? So will be Armenians. So that's his take. But he says, if I do that, I want Armenia to reciprocate. Why democratic Armenia is opposed to Azeris? Now there are about 350,000 of them. 180 were in 1989, 88. But when in 30 years, they have grown now to 350,000. And many of these want to go back to where their ancestors lived in Armenia. We're going to support them. We'll let them go and become Armenian citizens. We'll support them financially, let them rebuild their houses, and live happily there. And that will be the peace between the two nations.
Arthur, what's wrong with saying that is okay? Let's go 1 for every Armenian who wants to go back to Baku and Sumgait.
Right, and I'm sure that that's what Pashinyan is saying, but he also knows that there will be no Armenians who will go.
Then
And
there will be no Azeris coming.
maybe that's what he's saying. And Aliyev is telling him, no, I cannot make this dependent on what Armenians want to do.
Yeah, I'm saying that what happened in 1991 is not the same issue as 1 year ago when 150,000 Artsaksis were ethnically cleansed.
Right. I think I went too far to getting in Aliyev's mindset as a negotiator. So you're trying to negotiate with me as if I were Aliyev. We can play that as a kind of.
By the way, we really appreciate your negotiator's perspective. That is what we want to hear also.
He has many ways to reject that proposal. So one-on-one. So one Armenian comes, okay, here is another. He says, no, you have European aspirations. You're saying that these are your values. If these are your real values, how can you say no to someone who wants freely to come and live in the country where his ancestors live? We're not opposed. Let them come and live. But he knows that Armenians are not going to go. Armenians are not going to go.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, if he tells them, if the tribal leaders tell them, if they are extended family members who have jobs in the government tell them, they will. If they get the money, if they get the support, they will. So this is the challenge. And they're not telling us if that's the problem. Again, what I gave you right now is my reconstruction. I'm in the Platonic cave, you know. I'm just following the shadows. And I'm trying to guess what's happening, really.
Yeah. Arthur, do you have any information that Pashinyan is raising the issue of return of Armenians to Baku and Sumgait?
No, I don't. As I said, we don't know anything about what's going on there.
Right.
It was my reconstruction of what might be there. Because otherwise, I mean, I'm trying to think, what could be other obstacles, right? They have three issues. They're not telling us what these are. They have three issues. One, you talked about, more or less understandable. That's the constitution. But what are the other two? Well, one is the corridor, presumably. And the last one is the population. Because for Aliyev, we're going back to his vision and what they want. For Aliyev, Western Azerbaijan is not just a paper tiger. It's a real plan. It's a real plan that they've been talking about with Turkey on how they're going to do that. That's their vision of the future. And that vision of the future, by the way, does not contradict the Western view of how they want to get to Central Asia. If Turkish tanks are going to go to the Caspian Sea, these will be NATO tanks.
Right. Well, we need to make sure that the Russians understand this. We hear from our colleagues that the Russians don't think that this is a very big problem for them.
Well, I think Russians, we need to be very specific about who Russians. I think they understand many things, and they were watching Richard Moore of MI6 travel with lectures to Baku, to the Baku University, right? They know what's on the agenda. The problem we have with Russians is they have short-term interests, long-term threats, and they often, to satisfy their short-term interests, some of them may be even commercial, not strategic of military political basket. They go and do that at the expense of the long-term agenda. So that's a different topic, though, to look why it's happening and why we're where we are. But essentially, Azeris have managed to make things happen, keep the West at least neutral when it comes to our relations with Armenia, or to say that we cannot do anything against Azerbaijan right now, right? That's exactly. So they have achieved that. They have achieved that through their partnership with Israel, and not only. I mean, it's a long story. and make sure that Armenian-Russian relations get soured or better, even adversarial. And they've gotten both, and we are cornered. We are cornered.
Yeah.
It works for Pashinyan for keeping his power because the West pats him on his shoulder and says, you are a Democrat. And because Moscow still tolerates him because they also need him. But that's fine for his power games, keeping power in Armenia. It's detrimental for Armenian national interests.
Okay. Well, as usual, we have a lot more questions than we have time, Arthur. But let's wrap up our topics here. Let's see if anybody has some thoughts they would like to share with our listeners. Hovik, what's on your mind? Especially in September, you have a lot on your mind. I know this.
In what way? Well, there's always a lot in my mind, but I think that I can just urge people to keep the pressure up. COP29 hashtag on Twitter, comment, tweet, and let's keep the agenda of Armenian hostages in Baku at the top of the trends on Twitter.
Arthur, what's on your mind?
Well, the Srbazan movement had its reinitiation, I think, this last Sunday, and they did it not as a rally, but as a gathering at the Demircan Sports and Concert Complex. I only hope that they're going to keep the pressure, because the only thing that deters Pashinyan going full speed into making the deal with Azerbaijan and Turkey at the expense of our identity, at the expense of Armenian national interest, is the fear that he may get internal major protests that he won't be able to contain.
I think there is another date that's currently set, which was October 2.
October 2nd, right? They're going to have a rally on October 2nd.
Let's see how this movement ramps up at this point. All right, let's leave it there for today. Thank you, Arthur, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
That's our Week in Review recorded on September 23, 2024. We've been talking with Arthur G Martirosyan, who is a senior consultant with CM Partners. In 1994, after graduating from Yale University, he joined Conflict Management Group and Harvard Negotiations Project, and has since worked on conflicts in the former Soviet Union, the Middle East, the Balkans, Africa, and Latin America. For more on everyone in this show, please visit our show notes for this show at podcast.groong.org/episode number. I'm Asbed Bedrossian.
And this is Hovik Manucharyan.
Please follow us on social media and follow us everywhere you get your Armenian news. The links are in the show notes. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you soon.